sneak out the door. I just want to say my wife is sitting in the front, so I think that's a real vote of confidence. And I've asked Darryl to lock the doors anyway, so you're trapped. Before I get into the text of my speech, I ran into one slide that somehow sums up everything about ordinary life. Well, we've talked about evolution and the change in what God and spirituality are like. And I thought this one was kind of appropriate. And it says, if you ever start taking things too seriously, just remember that we're all talking monkeys on an organic spaceship flying through the universe. That is us. So, every once in a while on a Sunday morning, when I get ready to come in down here, I wake up and I say, Wayne Herbert, what are you doing? You're getting ready to go to church to listen to something about God and Jesus. You're going to hear a Methodist minister, a former Baptist preacher, and he's going to be teaching me lessons out of the Bible. And me, I'm showing up there? I have to tell you, it wasn't so very long ago that if I had given the choice between putting my hand on a hot stove or coming to church and listening to somebody give me a sermon about Jesus, I would have probably chosen the stove. But as you know, I come here quite regularly now. I'm standing in front of you talking about, or I'm going to talk about God and Jesus. And the question might be, why? And I think the simple answer is, it's a sense of community. A community that for me has learned to deepen as I've gotten to know you all better. I've gotten to know myself better. And I realize there is a way in life to live with peace, connection, and love that I didn't have before, and that I found here in listening to what Bill has had to say. So what did happen? The simple answer is connection. Finding that there's a better way of life than the life that I have been living. And it's a little bit more complicated than that. And so I'm going to describe today a little bit about a man who was essentially raised as an atheist, came to stand in front of you today and talk about God and Jesus. And I'm even going to tell you what I think God is. And we'll go from there. So I should tell you a couple of things, though, even though I'm sitting here and saying how wonderful it is that I've embraced the teachings of Jesus. I have not been saved. I have not accepted Christ as my Savior. It's very unlikely that you're going to find me knocking on your door asking you if you found Jesus. And it's pretty unlikely that you're going to find me across the way singing hymns or reciting the Nicene Creed. But I have come to appreciate that ritual that others enjoy and get something out of. I'm probably also a guy that's never going to accept the idea of a Trinity and a prophet Jesus who was also a God at the same time. That'll likely never be, but then again, I didn't think I'd be standing here either. So, but if you were listening into a conversation of mine, you might hear me talking about what Jesus had to say about how people should live for themselves and live together. How the only way that the world will ultimately change is if we change the way we treat one another as individuals. I've gained insight into what Jesus' teachings might mean to create hope and improvement in society that to me seems to be every day just careening ever farther off the tracks. And I have a deeper understanding of both the Bible and Jesus thanks to Bill's educational efforts. And I've developed a deeper, more complex view of what religion is about, what God might be about, especially in this day of scientific objectivity. And really, coming down to the question, is there a God at all? So, from the time that I reached my teenage years, and probably even before that, I was pretty much a confirmed atheist. I was positive. There's no cosmic guru out there. Nobody pulling the levers or running things. And then I moved on down the line. I became an agnostic atheist. I don't know if there's a God or not. Maybe there is, maybe there's not. I'd sure hate to be on the wrong side of the fence if there is. Then I kind of moved into being a theistic atheist. You know, there probably is a God, just not the one everybody's busy believing in right now. And then I'm back to a confirmed atheist. And now I'm back into a view that maybe there is a God, but it's not something that we can actually touch or understand. And does it matter anyway? And could God really be a way of us just trying to explain ourselves? So Bill has talked about the various stages of faith formation, how one's view of God and Jesus and spirituality change or develop over time. And to end up where I am today, it's necessary to understand the opposite, how you grow into faith rejection, how a person can grow into adulthood and be on the opposite side of the fence of those who hold religious views and attend church regularly. So I'm not talking about simply not being exposed to a religious education. I'm talking about running into religion time and time and time again, and each time finding all the more reason to run away. Bill has stated more than once how lucky he was to be born into the right faith. His parents told him being a Baptist was the right religion, and that was the only way to have a true relationship with Jesus. And I recall him saying that when he went to the seminary, he met a bunch of people that were like-minded, just like that. They were in the right religion. So it may be fair to say that people who have strong religious faith started out early. Children go to Sunday school while they're impressionable, and they learn the religion of their parents. So rule number one for creating a non-believer is don't go to Sunday school. Or if you do go to Sunday school, make sure it's sporadic. Make it worse than going to the dentist. Make it the worst thing to happen all week. Some wag once said that developing a strong religious faith was like getting a circumcision. You might get it done when you're young, but later in life, you're probably not going to consider it. Well, I didn't get it done early in life. My father was a confirmed atheist, and I can see how his childhood made him that way. His mother divorced his father when he was only 5 years old, and they moved from Liverpool, England, to a small town in rural Alberta, Canada. And this would have been in 1930. He was an English boy with an English accent and was forced to wear velvet blazer and shorts to high school or to school when all the other farm boys wore denim overalls. And that's a picture of my father at about age 11. He hated being in rural Alberta and being forced to do what he was wear what he was wearing. His mother was actually a very cruel person. If he didn't do what he was supposed to do, he got to eat dinner out on the stoop on the back porch. So he hated it, he rebelled, and his mother sent him back to England. Except his father refused to have anything to do with him when he got back there, and as a matter of fact, abandoned him, disappeared, moved to Ireland, and for what it's worth, I discovered him when he was 93 years old in 1998. He still wouldn't meet with my brother or I at that time. So he was out of life. I have poems that my father wrote at age 9 lamenting that his father would not be with him for any reason. He made good grades in school. I have notes that he hated Scripture, and he rebelled again while living in Liverpool, and he was sent back to his mother at age 13. He lasted 3 years before he left his mother, couldn't stand it anymore. So at age 16, he ran off and joined the Canadian Army. He decided that wasn't for him. He went AWOL and went and joined the Canadian Air Force, where he served until the end of the year. So I think it's safe to say that my father had a fairly devastating childhood and had no kind of use for any kind of God whatsoever that would subject him to this kind of abuse that he had grown up with. He would have nothing to do with any church, refusing to even be married in one for the 3 or maybe 4 times, I'm not sure, that he got married. And when I was, for example, in my teens arguing with him about the existence of God, he thundered out one night, "My God is logic!" And that was it. We never had another discussion about God again. So, on the other hand, my mother was a Doukhobor. And the Doukhobors are a religious sect that were driven from Russia into central Canada in the early 1900s. They spoke Russian. They were pacifists. They rejected church liturgy as such. They believed that God dwelled in each individual human being. They rejected government. They practiced pacifism. And so while my mother wasn't a mainstream believer per se, she had fairly strong religious tendencies that were introduced into her at an early age. Doukhobors were discriminated against in Canada, and they were readily identified by their Russian names. My mother's maiden name was Kazakov, and she changed her name to O'Connor, and the only evidence I have of that is she became Betty O'Connor Herbert when she left this tiny town of Kamsack, Saskatchewan, went to a secretarial school, and ended up moving to Vancouver, British Columbia to take on a job and find her fortune in life. So, my father meets my mother. And where, you might ask? They met in the Vancouver, British Columbia City Jail. My mother was a police stenographer at the jail. My father had been arrested for joyriding a car. But apparently they got along famously. One thing led to another. They get married. My father settles down. He graduates at the top of his university with a degree in physics. And they have a couple of kids, me and my brother. There we are, I think at some point in time. I'm not sure how old we are. But Dad remained very much of an atheist throughout his life. Mom tried to accommodate his beliefs, but she was also quite concerned that her sons were going to go to hell because they weren't getting a religious education. And she was sort of concerned that she might be in trouble herself for not doing what she needed to do about giving us a religious education. And so us boys got to go to church and Sunday school. Several different churches, actually. My mother was religious, but she didn't believe in the Trinity and was looking for a particular kind of place where she felt comfortable. And I think we went most often probably to Unitarian church. My brother and I hated church and Sunday school with a passion. And there was a couple of us again when we were slightly younger than I am now. We were often placed at the back of the class for being disruptive. All that religious education did us no good at all. And my mother was quite upset with us. We would get home from Sunday school, and she would upbraid us for not having paid attention, not having learned the lesson, not having drawn the things with Jesus on there. All of that. We were in bad shape. But my dad, didn't matter. He didn't believe in any of that anyway. And so it wasn't that he necessarily sabotaged what my mother was trying to do, but he just thought it would make believe anyway. So I didn't get the message. Actually, my brother and I, we just laughed about all that silly stuff they were talking about. So much for religious education. Rule number 2, if you want to raise a non-believer, is be sure to introduce that non-believer into plenty of well-meaning, mean people. Like a neighbor we had that constantly called us little heathens and told us if we didn't start going to church regularly, we were going to hell. And then she would go over and visit my mother and tell her that we were going to hell. And next thing we know, we're going to have to go back to Sunday school. Or how about the teacher that used to punish me because I didn't say the Lord's Prayer properly in school? Or some school principal at a school I don't even remember that when we were saying our prayers during convocation, he would come around and push everybody's head down if he didn't think they were saying prayers in the right way. And I just wish this cartoon had been there for him at that point in time. So, the rule number 3 then is that as your non-believer ages and advances in non-belief, we need to introduce advanced religious concepts like bigotry and racism and misogyny. I had a devout acquaintance who would condemn gays every opportunity he got by telling me all about the love of Jesus. And if that wasn't some sort of a cognitive dissonance in my mind, I don't know what was, but that was rejection. I had a neighbor who, across the fence, would on the one hand tell me to watch out for those Mexicans and those Asians and those unrepeatables, and then in the next sentence invite me to come to church and share the love of God and Jesus. What? I don't think so. Or I discovered as I grew up that women were second-class citizens in a church in many cases, and that just added to my confusion about church and females. So I put that up there as kind of the thing says, everybody here? Okay, let's vote. That's all men in the church, that's right, and all women on the outside. Thank you. And then rule number 4 is make religion anti-science, especially in a budding world. Insist that creation science be taught in school. Make me pray in school. I prayed in grade 12 in Stafford, Texas. John Foster Dulles High School. Every morning we had a prayer. Deny evolution. Make the Bible infallible. Make miracles real. Insist the world's 6,000 years old. Say you love the poor while putting vast wealth into your coffers. And then tell me I'm going to burn in hell because I don't believe. And then have a few people stand around, of course, and pray for me for my poor lost soul. Please! And then just to make sure that I am been fully immersed in non-belief, let's make sure that we make God in man's image. And let's make a God who loves me so much he's going to have me burn in hell if I don't love him back. And then finally I discover I'm born with original sin. I'm already broken, I'm doomed, and the only way I can get this all back is if I go to church and obey somebody's rules. And let me tell you, in my life, obeying the rules just wasn't where it was at. So it would seem by early adulthood, I was apparently a son following in his father's footsteps. So by the time I entered adulthood, I was pretty much in agreement with my father. Religion, Jesus, were just a bunch of stuff that other people used to control people, control their lives. And yet I had some confusion around religion and God, and whether there was a God that could actually do something for me. I was a product of alcoholic and abusive parents who were raised by unknowing parents, and they were unknowing parents in themselves. My brother and I were quintessential latchkey kids, no organized activity. We ran wild. We're lucky to never have been caught in numerous vandalous acts we committed while growing up. We had no adults in our lives to teach us, to guide us, to comfort us, really to teach about ethics, morals, responsibility, relationships. And I was a skinny kid. I was bullied. I had no self-confidence. I had a lot of shame. And there really was no concept of goodness in my life, certainly no concept of goodness of the God at all. But being of a split personality or schizophrenic or whatever, just in case I was wrong, I did things like, I read the Bible from cover to cover, which I don't recommend as a way to read the Bible, and I've forgotten most of it, to see if there's any truth that I had somehow missed while I was growing up. I tried the Unitarian Church for a while, the hymns, the sermons, the peace be with you. It wasn't working. It meant nothing to me, but more boredom. So my life continued with problems, unfulfilled, hollow, and it was a hollowness that I too often filled with drink and addictive behaviors. And then the ship really hit the sand. Truly. What had been an emotional roller coaster that included anger and rage and depression and everything else turned into true thoughts of suicide. And I really did nothing to fix this until my dear wife finally found 3 potential therapists, and she said, here is a list of 3 potential therapists. Call them, I'll kill you myself. And I am very thankful that my wife cared enough about me to push me out and encourage me to get some help. So, as many of you know, I first met Bill in a therapeutic setting. He was different than the other therapists I talked to. One wanted to put me on antidepressants, and I happened to find this with relationship to antidepressants. I tried those for a while, actually, and everybody said, you seem so calm. Well, I'm calm. I'm completely out of it. I had another one who wanted to put me through a regimen of cognitive behavioral therapy. You need a few weeks, you'll be fine, you'll be ready to go. And then I ran into Bill, and at our first session, the first question Bill asked me, he said, would you be willing to make major changes in your life if that's what it took to make you happy? Which was a kind of interesting question. And then he told me that the depression, the rage, the anger, the suicide, those weren't the problems that I was dealing with. Those were the symptoms that something wasn't working in my life. And as they say, the rest is history. I worked with Bill. At his suggestion, I did the Mankind Project Warrior Weekend, and that awoke me to the possibility of the way I had been living and offered me new possibilities for life. And I started to attend Bill's Ordinary Life class. Can't believe it was that long ago, was it? 2002. Long time ago. So my growth has been amazing and wonderful, I have to tell you. Rarely a week goes by that at the end of Bill's talks, I don't sit in my chair and say, wow, yes, Sally! Or that's amazing. And rarely does a week go by that Callista and I don't walk out of here, walk down to the car, and we talk about, I wonder how long we can keep this feeling we have this week. So you might be asking yourself, okay, that's nice. Bill's a good shrink. Nice that you enjoy ordinary life. But how did you make the leap from waking up and embracing the teachings of Jesus? From just going and visiting a shrink. And it turns out that for me, anyway, psychological growth turns out to be the same thing as spiritual growth. I know that Bill has spoken previously about psychospirituality. The idea that a psychological quest to become more highly individuated, develop a more integrated personality is really no different than a spiritual search for meaning and connection with sacred mystery. And this is some of the things that I would have to agree from a clinical perspective. A need for a sense of wholeness, a need for purpose, a need to acknowledge the positive and negative in life, and a need to confront, accept, and plan. And that's what happened to me. My quest to become psychological whole and healthy morphed into a quest to understand and have meaning in my life. And it turns out that while a scientific objective view of life is very useful for things like the creature comforts of technology or understanding the physical world, it's really terrible for understanding meaning and what makes things tick. So what is a useful way to find meaning? What is a way to understand life and what is happening to me and what is going on? And how do I participate meaningfully in my own life without simply watching it go by. And although this is often attributed to John Lennon, it was actually said by Mr. Alan Saunders, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And I realized I've been spending a lot of time in my life there making plans about what was going to be, and what do you know, it's a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. And what is the meaning of life? This was me making plans, or maybe not. But I did want to know, I didn't want life to pass me by like that. Modern consumer culture really isn't a way to find meaning to life. I don't think I'm psychologically prepared to move to a commune and find meaning in life. Moving out to the woods and being a hermit actually sounds a little bit appealing, but I'm fairly sure my wife would have a lot to say about that. And for me, at least initially, Jesus and religion were no solution either, because you may correctly imagine that I had a lot of ingrained negativity about anything to do with Jesus and the whole subject. And that is until I understood what Jesus was saying from an educated, spiritual perspective. When I realized that Jesus wasn't some God dropping in to save me, but rather as a man, a brilliant man, a prophet who saw the ultimate solution to mankind's ills thousands of years ago, I could throw away my negative beliefs about Jesus and embrace his essential message. When I realized the truth in Bill's assertion that heaven isn't some place to get to, but it's some place to live from, I realized that I was talking about a way to live in peace and harmony right here, right now, and provide wings for my own peace and provide an opportunity to transform the world. So, what does this mean now for belief? So I guess the first question is, who is Jesus? And I've come to reinforce my beliefs at this point in time that Jesus is not a God, not a part of a Trinity, but rather a man, a rather special man. And that's not Jesus. And he didn't grow up like this. I mean, if you can imagine being like Jesus growing up, that's just not going to happen. He probably looked a lot more like that. He grew up in poverty. He lived in a cruel, authoritarian world. He was a second-class citizen. And I believe that when he went off on his sabbatical, he was probably muttering to himself, I've got to figure out a way to deal with life before I get in real trouble. And he was a rebel with a cause. And like the Buddha, he came back enlightened, understanding the world, and the only way to deal with it was nonviolence, peace, and love. If Jesus hadn't been executed, and he had grown to a ripe old age, I believe two things would have happened. First, there would be no Christian religion as we know it today, because without a martyr, without the Roman Empire appropriating the essential teachings of Jesus and warping them into the Roman Catholic Christian Church, there might have been no religion at all, or if there had been one, it would have been something completely different. And second, if Jesus had lived to a ripe old age, he would have become as the Buddha. He would have been revered, a man who had reached nirvana, or heaven, if you will, as Jesus called it. He'd be teaching a way of life, maybe wandering forever. Christianity that might have formed might have been far more non-theistic, like the teachings of the Buddha. So what of religion then? What do I think about religion these days? Well, I have to tell you, I'm still not a religious person. Maybe religions like smoking, you have to take it up early in life or you don't smoke. In fact, when I hear Bill, when he's giving his talks on fundamentalism here, the ego in me wants to jump up and say, yeah, that's right, buddy, you're right. See, look what religion does to you. It's really bad stuff. It's useless. But that's not right either. I believe there's a seeker in every last one of us on earth. And I don't believe it's possible for any of us to reach any kind of a spiritual plateau yesterday, today, tomorrow, and we're there. It takes a long path. It's a long path that all of us must take if we want to get there. And that journey has to start somewhere, and for many, organized religion is the portal to the path that starts them on their own personal journey. And in that sense, I can even say that I am saddened that so many in today's society have turned away from religion, because what is the starting point of their path? What is their portal going to be to become introduced to the idea of a path to learning and spirituality in their lives? That's unfortunate. And thus, if your religious beliefs don't harm others, I celebrate your religion. I celebrate your religious practice, for just as I had to have a portal that is mine, strange as it may be, you have a path. God bless you. And I hope you find what I found on my path. And so that leads us to the big question. God. What is God? Is there a God? Is it even necessary to have a God to follow the teachings of Jesus? Is it necessary to have a God to live together in peace, connection, harmony? After all, Buddhism pretty much leads to the same place. And there's no God in the picture. There's nirvana. If you can get there, it's all done. But Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God, and I asked, what is that? And Buddha reached nirvana. And what is that? Or where is it? Is this the collective unconscious that Carl Jung has spoken about? Or is the collective unconscious really just Carl Jung's name for God? When Bill speaks of non-duality, of connectedness, does that mean we're part of a larger being? I am not you. I am not other than you. I am not God. I am not other than God. Does this very idea of non-duality presuppose that there must be something larger than us? I don't know. Does it take God to create a universe? If so, why did it take 6 days? And if you can explain the universe by attributing it to the existence of a God, then the obvious question is, well, where did the God come from? And to me, that's a road that leads to no answers. There is no one. So I'm pretty sure I know what God is. I think that's probably not God. There is no sky daddy out there with a flowing robe sitting on a golden throne. There's nobody that loves me so much he's going to have me burn in hell. There is no he, there is no she, there is no it. There is no let's make a deal God who listens to my prayers and who will offer me door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, if only I say the right prayer, sing the right song, believe the right things. There's no cosmic Santa Claus granting my fervent prayers if I've been a good boy and sending me pain and suffering if I have been a bad boy. There's no God behaving as a cosmic puppeteer running the show. But rather, if God exists at all, it's everywhere. It isn't in everything. It is everything. We've heard from Bill Iliadelio, and soon we'll be hearing from Michael Dowd that evolution and the Big Bang are integral to God, and that God is in a present, living, ever-changing universe. And so I would like to suggest to you the idea of a cosmic God, one that's embodied in, believe it or not, particle physics. And here's what it sort of looks like. Holly Hudley had a presentation not too long ago about God and the universe, and she's written eloquently in the blogs on the Ordinary Life webpage that we're all star stuff. We're all made of the same atoms, and if we're all made of the same stuff, then we're all part of God. So There's God is everywhere. That's what I meant. I left that out. So Holly is suggesting that everything out there, this magnificent universe, there's a picture of the Milky Way galaxy shot with an iPhone. Beautiful. There's actually the Milky Way galaxy as we can see it from our own humble Earth. So I kind of like this idea of God being present from the moment the Big Bang went off. It really appeals to the rational scientist in me, and yet I have to wonder if that's actually true. I'm made of atoms, and you're made of atoms, and those atoms all came from exploding supernovas, and that's all really great. But atoms are just atoms. So if I take an atom and I look at it, is that God? Any more than a tree is God? And I suppose in one sense we say we're all one and one for all. Yeah, it's God there. But on the other hand, it's still an atom. So if I'm looking for God in this universe that all these folks are talking about, where is that God? So I'm going to suggest to you that even though we think we're living in a physical reality, I got a hard podium, we're in this room, we think we're in the middle of something, we're actually in the middle of nothing. We're in a manifestation of energy, or maybe that energy is God. So the universe is big. I think Holly talked about this. 13 billion light years across. Billions of suns in our galaxy alone, our galaxy. Our own sun, which is a little average, small sun, is a huge monster. It's a constantly exploding thermonuclear bomb. Puts out so much energy we can't even begin to comprehend. 1/billionth of its energy reaches us. So it's kind of big. And you can get a good sunburn out of 1/billionth of the energy. So there's billions and billions of galaxies. So it sounds like there's a lot of stuff out there. It sounds like there's a tremendous amount of stuff out there. But what if I told you that the universe is 99.99999, 15 nines worth of nines after the decimal point, empty? It's pretty empty out there. So let's just take a real brief example. The diameter of the sun's about 860,000 miles. The nearest star is 4 light years away. That's 24 trillion miles, give or take. And if you were traveling at 20,000 miles an hour, it'd take you about 127,000 years to get to that nearest star, which is generally longer than a Friday commute out the Gulf Freeway. And that's just to the nearest star. Most are much farther away, and in between is a whole lot of nothing. And then even when it comes to the rest of the universe and the galaxies, the nearest galaxy to us, other than the ones that hang around our local area here, is the Andromeda galaxy, and it's only 2 million light years away, and there's nothing in between. There's nothing. So there's nothing in the universe. A whole lot of nothing. But it turns out that even within the something that's there in all the stars and planets, there's still a whole lot of nothing. So let's imagine a drop of water. There it is. How big would you need to make this drop of water to see the individual atoms in it? Well, we put the drop of water on a tabletop. We make it magically the size of our house. Now we expand it even more, and we make it the size of a football stadium. We make that drop of water even bigger. It covers all of the city of Houston. And we make that drop of water bigger yet until it runs from Louisiana border to El Paso, all the way across the state of Texas. And now we can finally see the atoms in that drop of water. They all look like a bunch of grapes. That's how small atoms are. But we take one of those atoms, okay? Just one of those little atoms that's sitting there. And we'll take the hydrogen atom because it's simple. It's only got one little proton in it. And we start blowing up this atom. We blow it up to the size of a basketball. And we blow that atom up to the size of an air balloon. And we blow it up until the size of NRG Stadium. And you know what we find? Well, we can actually finally see the atom. There's an electron floating around somewhere. And there is a nucleus in there. And, wow, you know how big that nucleus is? Out of all of NRG Stadium, taking up the atom, there's one nucleus the size of a marble. So an atom turns out to be 99.99996. That's 12 nines after the decimal point. So even inside the atom that we think is something, it's mostly nothing. But why should we stop there? Let's grab that nucleus and let's take a look inside the nucleus. Inside a proton and a neutron, there are things called quarks. And those are even smaller. As a matter of fact, we're not sure what they're made from. And for sure, the best efforts to measure them, we can't tell how big they are. They appear to have no size at all. They don't appear to have any mass. So what is it when you have something that has no size and no mass, yet apparently is in the middle of a nucleus in an atom? It's nothing. But it isn't, because apparently it's there. So now we enter into an area of science that really is as much religion as science. And this is quantum electrodynamics. Because nobody knows for sure what's really going on in this little teeny tiny space. You can't really call these particles. You can't pretend that they react like a baseball. You can't pretend that they behave like a planet. The electron doesn't really orbit a nucleus. They don't work that way. So what is out there for us? And the best thing scientists have come up today is that we all live in a quantum field. And what is that quantum field? Well, we don't know, but it's a quantum field we live in. And that electron, and that quark, and that proton, and all this other mishmash and stew of particles, they are all excitations. They are all permutations in this quantum field. And so it would seem that everything we are, me standing right here, I am nothing but energy changes in a quantum field, and so are you. We can't see it, we can't measure it. So in the end, I still don't know what God is. But I do believe that something pervades our entire universe. And is that the universal connection we all share? Could be. I don't know. Then does it matter? And I think not. I think it matters not a whit what your religious beliefs are when it comes to God and the existence of the universe. I think I can live my life without worrying about that too much. And I can celebrate the joy and connection without worrying about whether there's a God or not. It really comes down to a question, what story do I want to live my life out of? And to conclude, I will say then that if God really does exist, I realize that I can't put God in a box of my own making. Thank you.